Here's something that's going to bother you a little bit, and I think it should. Two cars roll off the same assembly line on the same day, same engine, same transmission, same everything. One of them hits 350,000 miles without ever needing a major repair. The other one is sitting at a junkyard at 160,000 miles with a seized engine. Now, people love to say the difference is Japanese engineering. They'll tell you it's the metallurgy, the tolerances, the manufacturing precision. And sure, all of that matters. But if that were the whole story, both of those cars would have lasted the same amount of time because, remember, they came from the same factory. So what actually happened? What's the real secret hiding behind the legend of the indestructible Japanese engine? I've spent a long time talking to mechanics, not the kind you find at quick lube shops, but the ones with 30 years of grease under their fingernails who've torn apart thousands of engines and can tell you exactly why each one failed. I've talked to fleet operators who run dozens of vehicles simultaneously and track every single service interval with military discipline. I've listened to long-term car owners in Japan who treat their vehicles the way you'd treat a piece of fine machinery, not just a tool to get from point A to point B. And what I kept hearing over and over again wasn't a secret ingredient. It wasn't a special oil or a proprietary additive, and it was something much simpler and honestly much more humbling than that. It was habits, consistent, disciplined, almost boring habits. Let me paint a picture for you. In Japan, there's a vehicle inspection system called the Sheiken. It's a mandatory, rigorous inspection that every car must pass every 2 years once it reaches a certain age. And this system is strict. We're talking about dozens of checks covering brakes, emissions, lighting, undercarriage components, fluid levels, belt conditions, the kind of comprehensive examination that most Western car owners never put their vehicles through in the entire time they own them. Now, here's what's interesting. Because people know this inspection is coming, they don't wait for something to break. They fix it beforehand. They replace the worn belt before the inspector sees it. They address that slight hesitation in the idle because they know it'll fail the test. And what the Sheiken did, almost accidentally, is build a culture of proactive maintenance. And that culture is deeply embedded in how Japanese drivers think about their cars in a way that goes far beyond just passing a government test. Think about how most people in other parts of the world approach car maintenance. Something starts making a noise. They turn up the radio. The check engine light comes on. They put a piece of black tape over it. I'm joking, but only barely. The oil change reminder starts blinking and they mentally note they'll handle it next week, which turns into next month, which turns into 6 months later when they finally get around to it. This isn't laziness necessarily. It's just that most people were never taught to treat their car as a system of interconnected parts, where the health of one thing directly affects the health of everything else. In Japan, that understanding is more widespread. It's cultural. And the engines that result from that culture are the ones that run for 250,000 miles and beyond. Here's the thing that mechanics will tell you and that almost nobody wants to hear. The single biggest killer of engines is not hard driving. It's not even bad fuel. It is delayed oil changes combined with short trips. Let that sink in for a second. You're doing a bunch of short 5-minute drives around town. The engine never fully reaches operating temperature. Moisture and fuel residue accumulate in the oil. And if you're not changing that oil on a proper schedule, you are slowly turning your lubrication system into a sludge factory. And the insidious part is that this damage is invisible. You can't see it happening. The engine sounds fine. It starts fine. Everything feels fine right up until it doesn't. And by then, the damage is already done. The bearings are worn. The oil passages are partially blocked. The rings have lost their seal. And no matter how good the oil you pour in next time is, you cannot undamage what's already been damaged. Now, let's get specific, because I want you to walk away from this with things you can actually do, not just a vague sense that you should take better care of your car. The first thing, and this is the one that separates the cars that last from the ones that don't, is oil change timing. Not oil type, not oil brand, not synthetic versus conventional. Timing. If your manufacturer says every 5,000 miles, you do it at 4,800. If you're doing a lot of short city trips, you do it even sooner, because those short trips are harder on oil than highway driving. A fleet operator I spoke with runs a delivery company with about 40 vehicles, mostly Japanese makes. He told me his average vehicle lifespan is nearly double the industry standard. His secret? He services every truck at 80% of the recommended interval, not 100%. He never lets a vehicle go right to the edge of its service window. He said it cost him a little more in oil and filters up front, but he hasn't replaced an engine in over a decade. That's not luck, that's math. The second habit is about how you start your car. And I guarantee most people are doing this wrong every single day. When you start a cold engine, the oil is settled down into the oil pan overnight. For the first few seconds after startup, the oil pump is working hard to push lubricant back up into the top of the engine, into the valve train, the cam lobes, the upper cylinder walls. During those first seconds, metal is contacting metal with minimal lubrication. Now, what do most people do? They start the car, throw it in reverse, and immediately back out of the driveway. They're already driving. And some people, and this genuinely hurts to think about, will immediately rev the engine hard to clear it out or warm it up faster. What they're actually doing is accelerating metal-on-metal wear during the most vulnerable moment of the engine's day. Every single time, twice a day, every day for years. What Japanese drivers and what experienced long-term vehicle owners will tell you is to let the car idle for at least 30 seconds to a minute before you drive away. Not 5 minutes of idling in the driveway. That's actually not great for the engine either and wastes fuel. But a short, calm idle period while the oil pressure builds and the lubricant reaches every corner of the engine is worth more than almost any expensive additive you could pour in. Then, once you do start driving, keep your RPMs moderate for the first 5 to 10 minutes. Gentle acceleration, easy cruising. Let the engine reach its proper operating temperature before you ask anything of it. The coolant temperature gauge climbing to its normal position isn't just an indicator, it's permission to drive normally. The third habit is something I'd call proactive listening. Japanese mechanics will often describe a healthy car ownership mindset as one where you're always in conversation with your vehicle. You notice the small things. You notice when the engine takes a half second longer to turn over in the morning. You notice when there's a faint vibration at highway speeds that wasn't there last month. You notice when the fuel economy is quietly dropped by 2 miles per gallon. These are not random events. These are the engine and the drivetrain telling you something is beginning to go wrong. And the person who responds to those signals early spends a few $100s fixing a small problem. The person who ignores those signals spends several $1,000s fixing the large problem that the small problem became. Let me give you an example that I think illustrates this perfectly. There's a phenomenon that mechanics call death by 1,000 neglects. It's not one big failure. It's the slightly low coolant level that was never topped off, combined with the aging thermostat that was never replaced, combined with the water pump that was starting to weep a tiny bit around the seal, combined with a delayed oil change that let the oil get just a little too dirty and thick. None of these things alone would kill your engine. Together, on a hot day, driving up a long hill, they absolutely will. And when that engine overheats and warps the head gasket and the repair bill arrives, people say, these things just happen. But they don't just happen. They accumulate. Now, let's talk about something that I think gets massively underrated in the car maintenance conversation, and that is tire pressure. I know, you came here for engine secrets and I'm talking about tire pressure. But bear with me, when your tires are underinflated, your engine works harder. The rolling resistance increases. The drivetrain components experience more stress. Your fuel economy drops. Your brakes work less efficiently. And all of that extra stress flows back into the powertrain and the engine. Long-haul truckers and fleet operators know this intimately. Proper tire inflation is free, and it extends the life of not just your tires, but every mechanical component connected to them. In Japan, checking tire pressure at regular intervals is a standard part of owning a vehicle. It's not seen as extra effort. It's just part of the routine. Here's another costly mistake that people make constantly, and it's one that feels completely harmless in the moment. Running your car on a nearly empty fuel tank. Most people think this is purely a you might run out of gas risk. But modern fuel-injected engines have electric fuel pumps that sit inside the fuel tank, and those pumps are cooled and lubricated by the fuel itself. When you regularly run the tank down to the last few miles, you're running that pump hot and dry, stressing it unnecessarily. Fuel pumps on well-maintained vehicles can last the entire lifespan of the car. Fuel pumps on vehicles that regularly run near empty can start failing at 80,000 miles. And when a fuel pump fails, you're not just paying for the pump, you're paying for the labor to access it, which on many vehicles means dropping the fuel tank. Keep the tank above a quarter, ideally above a third. It's such a simple habit, and the cost is literally zero. Now, I want to address the people who think that using premium or expensive products makes up for inconsistent maintenance. I understand the logic. You use the best full synthetic oil money can buy, you use premium fuel, you buy the fancy air filter, you're taking care of your car, right? And those things do matter. I'm not dismissing them. But here's what mechanics see all the time. Someone running top-shelf synthetic oil and changing it every 10,000 miles, then wondering why their engine is sludging up. Meanwhile, someone else is running conventional oil and changing it faithfully every 4,000 miles, and their engine looks pristine at 200,000 miles. The quality of the product is secondary to the frequency and consistency of the service. Think of it like this. Would you rather brush your teeth once a month with the best toothpaste money can buy, or brush twice a day with regular toothpaste? The frequency is what does the protective work? The quality of the product is a bonus on top of a foundation of consistency. The same principle applies to coolant flushes, transmission fluid changes, and brake fluid replacements. Most people never change their brake fluid in the entire time they own a car. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air over time. Old, moisture-saturated brake fluid has a lower boiling point, which means under hard braking conditions, it can vaporize inside the brake lines, causing brake fade or complete brake failure. It also becomes more corrosive and starts attacking the rubber seals and metal components of your braking system from the inside. A brake fluid flush every 2 to 3 years costs almost nothing. The brake caliper replacement it prevents costs a lot. And yet, it's one of the most commonly skipped maintenance items there is. Long-term car owners in Japan will often talk about something that doesn't translate perfectly into English, but roughly means respectful use. It's the idea that how you drive your car on a daily basis is itself a form of maintenance. Smooth acceleration protects the transmission and reduces stress on engine mounts, CV joints, and drivetrain components. Anticipating traffic and coasting to a stop rather than braking hard at the last second extends brake life, reduces heat stress, and uses the engine's natural compression to slow the vehicle, which is infinitely gentler than aggressive braking. Keeping a safe following distance isn't just a safety habit, it's a mechanical habit because it prevents the constant acceleration and braking cycle that wears out engines and brakes much faster than steady driving. There's a concept in engineering called thermal cycling fatigue. Every time your engine heats up from cold and then cools back down, the metal components expand and contract. This is normal and unavoidable, but the rate at which you heat things up matters enormously. Slamming a cold engine straight into high RPMs creates rapid, uneven thermal expansion that stresses the metal, the gaskets, and the seals. Doing this repeatedly over years creates microfractures and accelerated wear that shows up as oil consumption, compression loss, and eventually catastrophic failure. The engines that last 300,000 miles are the ones that were warmed gently, driven smoothly, and never asked to perform beyond their comfortable operating range until they were properly up to temperature. One more thing I want to highlight before we close, and this is something that fleet operators talk about a lot: documentation. Keeping a maintenance log, not in your head, written down. Every oil change, every filter replacement, every time you topped off a fluid, every repair, every inspection. When you have a written log, you can see patterns. You notice that you've been putting off the transmission service for longer than you planned. You notice that your oil consumption seems to have increased over the last 6 months, which might indicate early ring wear or a valve seal beginning to fail. You have evidence, and if you ever sell the vehicle, that documentation is worth real money because it proves to the buyer that the car was cared for. Japanese used car markets place enormous value on service history documentation. It's not paperwork for the sake of paperwork. It's a record of respect for the machine. So, let's bring this all the way home. The legend of the indestructible Japanese engine is real, but it's not a legend about metal. It's a legend about people. It's about a culture that teaches you to address small problems before they become expensive ones, to listen to your vehicle, to service it ahead of schedule rather than behind it, to drive with mechanical sympathy rather than mechanical aggression. The Toyota with 400,000 miles on it isn't magic. It's the result of someone, somewhere, changing the oil on time, every time, checking the tire pressure, not ignoring the small noise that appeared 3 months ago, letting the engine warm up on cold mornings, keeping the fuel tank above a quarter tank, flushing fluids on schedule, driving smoothly and consistently. The truth is, most people spend more time researching which phone case to buy than they do understanding the maintenance needs of a machine they depend on every single day, and that could put them in serious financial trouble if it fails. Engine longevity isn't luck. It isn't magic. It's not even primarily about the brand on the hood. It is almost entirely about the habits of the person holding the keys. The good news, and this is genuinely great news, is that habits can be changed. Starting today, starting with your next drive, you can start treating your car the way those legendary high-mileage Japanese vehicles were treated. The engine will reward you for it in ways that show up slowly, quietly, and then very dramatically when you hit 200,000 miles. And the engine is still running smooth and strong, while everyone around you is making payments on a replacement